So, Jesse, I guess my first question is, it was a big reveal yesterday. It was the first park where there's going to be practices and things like that. What was it like to finally see grass laid and purpose there and sprinklers and the whole thing? It was a big day for you. What was it like out there?
It made it all feel really real. There's been people working on this project, if you date back to when Vancouver won the bid. So, it started off with, the bid team and then it slowly moved on to adding a couple here and there. I joined the team about 2 years ago. And a lot of what we've been doing is, making sense really of like what's coming our way. What do we need to do? What are the schedules? And yesterday and this weekend actually very much felt like the starter's pistol went off, like all the planning was sort of, evaluated in that moment of time, or that 48 hours of time that was this weekend. And seeing that, grass, and we mentioned this in one of our press conferences yesterday, 97.5% complete, on budget, ahead of schedule, just really made us feel confident, that we are up to this and that we are going to do a good job. So for me, it was, the first kind of test of readiness. And it was also a moment of pride as a leader, to see that the team, even though we've, had major events like the Olympics and we've had really high profile concerts, like the last Taylor Swift Eras concert took place in Vancouver. And, recently we held the Invictus Games. The World Cup is kind of a different entity. And so it involves a lot of guesswork, and yesterday just really made me feel good about the work that we had done and the ability to complete the work that's left ahead.
No stranger to World Cup formats because of the Women's World Cup that was a part of the hemisphere when it was here. I guess, how different a city is Vancouver when it comes to infrastructure, hosting, knowing what's coming since the Women's World Cup? How different a city is it? How much was learned? And where do you think you are at this point?
Yeah. I used I think I coined a term yesterday. I called it a layer cake of legacy. Really every time you do one of these large, events, you not only build up infrastructure, but you build up capability too. You upskill your talent, you create opportunities for innovation, you make your local companies more competitive, you create talent pools. You create companies that can service the needs of these major global sporting events. And what I really felt yesterday was that, we have taken the legacy and the foundation that has been built by every event, and we're building on top of it. So, I've never felt like we were starting from scratch. I felt like we were building on top of something, and that we had to live up to the previous events that we've hosted and done a really good job of hosting.
How many people are we talking about here? I guess in the host committee itself, how many different committees are within the committee to make sure, whether it's infrastructure, transportation, volunteer, all these kinds of things? How many moving parts are there in this jigsaw puzzle that leads to this layer cake of legacy that you're creating here?
Yeah, I call it the biggest group project ever. I love to tell my daughter, like, don't be put off by group projects in school, because I tell you, like, as your career progresses, that they only get bigger and bigger. Look, this is probably the most interconnected project ever. You have a number of moving parts, and you're going to talk to all the host committees, and you'll see that they're all kind of, made up a little bit differently. But the kind of the standard components is that there's FIFA, who is a large central player in all of this. And they have their sort of, event oversight. And then we, the local host committees, are obligated to create similar circumstances in each one of the 16 cities. We've all signed up to these host city agreements that have, a set of guidelines that need to be adhered to. And ultimately, people coming from overseas, if they decide to pick 2 or 3 cities, you want to make sure that they have a World Cup experience, right? Not a local city. I mean, obviously, we want to have the city there too, because that's why we do these things. We want to create tourism legacies as well. But in the case of Vancouver, this is very much sort of a government-led initiative. We've got the government of Canada and the province of British Columbia, who are generously ensuring that we have the resources that we need. You have the city of Vancouver that is sort of acts as the key delivery agent here. But we're also working with like our transit authorities. We're working with 18 core security agencies, not to mention the international cooperation. We're working with our destination marketing partners. We're working with, we've got our fan festival happening at one of the most popular parks in the city, the Pacific National Exhibition that takes place. And so we're working with them. And then, I would say that, the host committee, you nailed it. It's all of these work streams. So, there's myself, I lead the team, but the team is a number of leaders who have tapped in a combination of, businesses that excel at doing this, event production companies and entertainment companies and sporting companies, legal firms, like procurement companies, finance companies. And then we have all of the internal structures as well. We're organized around work streams, and our big ones are fan festival, mobility, safety and security, those types of things.
This to me sounds like one of the largest PDF files or Excel spreadsheets humanly possible to try and get everybody on the same page for all of these kinds of things. I mean, this is how big do you have to rent out do you have to rent out BC Place or the old P&E Coliseum to sit there and get everybody? Do you have to go to like Abbotsford or something to have everybody under one roof to make sure that you're all talking in the same space? How does this work with all of these different places and all this communication?
Yeah, it's really interesting. It is really like a project management masterclass. Like communication is really essential. And one of the really interesting things about this is if your structure is not right and you can't convey the communication effectively enough, you're not going to be successful, because a lot of what happens in this tournament is dynamic. So for example, 48 hours ago, we just found out the teams. And so you need to be able to assess, analyze, and compute based on that information, like very quickly. I feel really good about the team structure we have. We have a number of different forums where people are kind of regularly meeting, and, thanks to modern technology, sometimes we get in a room and sometimes it's hybrid. But we regularly have, over 100 people on like leadership positions talking every other week, talking about what's the latest in every work stream, what's new, incoming from FIFA, what's happening, just with the teams, et cetera, and doing change management, to use like, project management lingo, but, change managing on the go.
When it comes to the fan experience, transportation, the conversation that we had with Toronto, the times that I've been there, dealing with traffic coming from Pearson, you're coming down the QEW, you're going into town, and it is gridlock. And they're trying to figure out ways around that. They're trying to introduce folks to public transportation and TTC. For those that aren't familiar with Vancouver and transportation in and of itself, what is the plan to make sure that everybody's getting to the P&E for FanFest, getting to BC Place, and making sure that while there is traffic, which is understood, it's not overwhelming to the infrastructure and to security and all these different things to make everything go as swimmingly as possible?
Lucky for those coming to Vancouver, I mean, we are often referred to as one of the most sort of advanced active transportation networks in North America. Our local transportation engineering teams here in Vancouver have been trying to get people moving in active transportation methods rather than vehicles for a very long time from a policy standpoint. So we have a really, really robust SkyTrain system. We have commuter rail system. We have a really, really good like our transit system is very effective, and it's very full, and it's very well used. And so working with TransLink, which is our authority here, we've been planning around sort of our match dates for a long time. We also have a committee that involves, British Columbia Ferry Corporation, our airport authority, our provincial government, like the equivalent of the Department of Transport, those types of things. And we've all been working really hard to make sure that whatever we can do to ease, the movement of people, whether it's from the land border, through our cruise ship terminals, or through our airport, that we are thinking ahead, understanding where the hotels are, what the patterns are, what time people will be coming, the movement into matches, out of matches. We've been doing some pretty great modeling. And then to supplement our, already robust transit network. We are very much a ride share community, a shared bike system. It's a Rogers biking system that's sponsored by them, and then Lime Scooter, and our cycling network is really great too. So our key message to people is don't drive, take the transit system. It'll get you there and back much faster.
Do you have conversations with other host committees about question and answer, bouncing ideas back and forth? Is it a three-dimensional kind of a thing where you're asking advice, getting advice, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think we have to. Some of the problems, or maybe not, that's the wrong word. Some of the questions that we're answering are novel, right? Like, these are things I don't think we've done a 16, if I'm mistaken, city coordinated North American event before. I think it's the first time. And also we're operating within the same guidelines provided by FIFA. We're really close with Seattle, for example. We talk to them a lot. We're very close in general, both culturally, from a geographic perspective. There's lots of, concert happens in Seattle. You see Vancouverites going down there, and likewise people coming up from Seattle to go skiing at Whistler, what have you. We have a label for that. One of the things we hear often is, there's 7 matches in Vancouver and there's 6 matches in Seattle, but oftentimes you'll hear there's 13 matches in Cascadia.
Yep.
And so people see it as a bit of a cluster of matches. We're really close with Toronto, obviously, one of the only other Canadian city. We talk to them all the time, and obviously we share national interests as well. And then, FIFA does a really good job of bringing all the host cities together a few times a year, where we sit in the large rooms and we share and ask questions and get to talk to one another, and then also have, one-to-one meetings with FIFA. And it's a well-structured system to enable information sharing.
Jessie Adcock, host committee lead for Vancouver, getting ready for the World Cup in 2026, hanging out with us here on the SDH Network. I know somewhere in your office, and this is a question that is a universal question that I ask everybody. I know somewhere in that office, there is a to-do list. and it's either on an Excel spreadsheet, it's a document, it's like a Google Doc, it is maybe on one of those big 6-foot by 8-foot dry erase boards that I didn't see in your office earlier today, that's off in a corner someplace, and it's got a bunch of different colored marker, and it's got a bunch of different lines and squiggles going all over the place. Where is that list? Where is that to-do list between now and June? And what do you think the next thing that you can cross off that to-do list is as your preparation gets right to 0 hour in June when it comes to Vancouver and the World Cup?
Well, I can tell you exactly where we are on the plan. We just crossed the draw off, and now what happens is calculus, equations that have been sitting there and scenarios that we've been modeling. We can now actually plug the variables in. We can plug in what our match times are, what our teams are, and start to actually refine our kind of more broad plans. Yeah, I mean, we have a robust set of information. We have risk registers, we have issue registers, we have traffic pattern models. We have data around, I guess up until 48 hours ago, anything is possible.
Mm-hmm.
And so up until this point, the goal was just be at the moment in time where now you're ready to plug the data in, and then let the math happen in terms of, okay, now we know that the first match is a 9 p.m. match. That's a very different model than it could be, which is, on Friday going into the draw, our models were, it could be anywhere between 12 and 8 p.m. So, we were thinking we could have a noon start, a 3 start, a 6 start, and then in the end, we've ended up with, we know exactly, we've got a 9 p.m. start, we've got a noon start, we've got a morning start. And so where we go now is we take all of that stuff, we plug in the numbers, and now we can actually spit out some more accurate forecasts. And I feel like the team was ready for this moment at this moment. It's not, I never got the sense, and I don't have the sense that we weren't ready. We were basically like, okay, like catcher's gloves, probably wrong sport, but like we were ready, for this to happen. And so now we're ready to go. And the next few months is really going to be dropping all the planning that no longer has a place and going with the models that do.
When it comes to capital investment, whether we're talking local government, provincial government, Canadian government, how big a number are we talking about here? How much investment has been made to make sure that Vancouver as a host city is going to be what it needs to be across the board? And I'm talking, I guess, everything from infrastructure to stuff that's in place that needs to be renovated, new things that need to be constructed. How much of a capital investment has there been so far in the Vancouver properties?
Yeah, so I love that question. The way we always ask that question is people always want to know how much is it going to cost? And we don't often figure out like the revenue side of the equation either, right? So yes, there's a lot of investments that are made, but we also have like revenue sources. We're going to be making money at the Fan Fest. We're also going to, we have a commercial program that we're able to generate revenue off of. For example, like we have a revenue share with FIFA on certain things like our merchandise. And so between everything, we net out it's a range up until this point of $85 to $145 million net. So that's taking the costs and then netting out the revenues. So, I mean, that was the predicted bottom line. That said, we've only been planning up until this point. So, we shared yesterday that the pitch that, for those fans that are following, we shared that it was a $24 million investment and that it was, relatively complete, ahead of schedule and on budget. Unlike that, a lot of the costs that we're going to incur have yet to be incurred. In terms of the stadium investment, that's one that I'd prefer the stadium talks to, but those numbers are pretty out in the public. And I will say that stadium is a world-class stadium, and it's hosting world-class events. And without those investments, we don't attract the events that we're attracting. So they're much needed infrastructure upgrades and they're much needed investments. And I have no doubt that, some of the economic modeling that's been done has shown that the event is going to have over $1 billion of productivity, in the province. And there's been some economic studies done that say that it'll be double that. And I have no doubt that it will.
When it comes to volunteers, and I know that they are a key part of the process, Toronto had, I think, 6 figures worth of volunteers for like maybe 5,000 volunteer spots. What has the response been from the community and from the province and really from Cascadia to want to be involved as a volunteer to help the process out from a manpower and boots on the ground kind of approach?
It's really fascinating. So the volunteer slots have been almost as competitive as tickets, I will say. So in our case, we're looking at about 3,500 volunteers, 3,800 volunteers that we're going to need locally, and we're working with FIFA on the volunteer program. And we really enjoyed watching the applications go through all summer because you could see that Vancouver and Toronto, I mean, I know like I didn't keep track of all the American cities and where they were on the leaderboard of that, but like Vancouver and Toronto were consistently top 3 in terms of domestic and international interest for volunteer positions. So that tells you something about people wanting to visit your city. So super proud about that. We're now starting our volunteer tryouts. So we've got folks coming in, and we're starting to try out people for leadership roles in the volunteer corps. And in the new year, we'll start to, put out offers and assignments and that type of thing. But again, the interest to become a volunteer is far less than the demand to be a volunteer.
And I mean, it is one of those where you feel like you've almost gotten a different kind of golden ticket when you get to become a volunteer for your city or wherever it is. For someone who's never been to Vancouver and they are interested, they're trying to figure out, okay, where can I go that's a host city that I've never been to? Why should someone go to Vancouver to see matches at BC Place and be a part of the experience there in British Columbia province? For someone who's never been, why should they go?
Because there's so much to do. I think the first thing is that we have to take a look at the stadiums. Our stadium is truly unique. It is in the heart of our downtown. And when the stadium is in the heart of downtown, it's a completely different experience than if you're driving out to a stadium. Not to knock any of the big stadiums, fair enough. Like the stadiums in the US are like, they've got that like large atmosphere, big capacities, et cetera. And so they create a different kind of atmosphere. What we offer, I think BC Place is a pretty robust sized stadium. It's going to have a capacity of about 54,000 people. but it's right downtown. So, you come in, you can walk in from your hotel. When you come in, you can stop at a restaurant or a museum or a tourist attraction or, world-class shopping, world-class eating, all on the water, beautiful, stunning imagery, tons to do. You can be swimming, hiking, like in the winter, you've heard that, in the same day, if you're really, really like outdoorsy, you can kind of, swim in the ocean, ski on a mountain, do all of the play golf all in the same day in Vancouver. It's that kind of city. It is really, really a stunner. And so I think that the combination of the concentration of things to do in and around the stadium in a walkable environment truly provide you with a way to maximize your time in the city.
And we are looking forward to continue to find out what's going on, what else is on that list, what else gets crossed off as you're getting ready for all the matches that you're going to have there in Cascading at BC Place. If I'm looking at it correctly in my old man eyesight on the 280 character app on FWC26 Vancouver. And then there are links to a bunch of different other things that you can do there, and keep an eye on the process there in Vancouver. Jessie, it was great to catch up with you. I'd like to put a bookmark right here and come back and visit and find out what else is going on there in Vancouver. Thanks for dropping by, SDH, and we're looking forward to catching up soon and seeing progress as we get ready for the World here coming up this summer.